so wave. It will be posted on our YouTube, and you can watch it back anytime you want. Along with that, just try to keep your mics muted throughout the program today. And I think that's all I've got. So passing it off to Rob now to introduce ATW.
Well, thank you, Bailey. Again, I am Rob Reinhardt. I work with Bankers Trust Company, and I am so happy that you give us the opportunity to do this sponsorship, because some of the groups that you've put together and the trainings you've done have been absolutely fantastic. So Bailey, hats off to you at the Chamber. At Bankers Trust, we all are a full service bank. We're the largest independently privately held bank in the state of Iowa, with offices around the metro area, as well as we have a loan production office in Omaha and offices down in Phoenix for those who want to take their cold weather birds and fly down there. Anyway, again, just want to let you all know that we are so happy to be a part of this, and especially I'm excited to hear what Todd and his team have to say about this, as we all have a little bit to learn, and certainly as times change, we need to adjust with the changes. Thank you, and I'll turn it back over to you then, right?
Yes, now it's Rob's turn. Not Rob, you're Rob. Todd's turn. Todd's turn to take over for the day.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for giving me an opportunity to share some thoughts and ideas. And as Bailey said, this is just kind of a real comfortable conversation here today. And I'm looking forward to just sharing some thoughts and ideas with you as we talk about, this talent development during COVID times. And I think that, it's been almost 8 months since, COVID started. I still remember back, in March when we were all wondering, okay, is this going to be a big deal? Is this not going to be a big deal? But I think what we found is that over the last, 8 months, organizations have really had to adapt, in a lot of different ways. One area that organizations have had to put really kind of, that they put on somewhat of a temporary hold at the beginning of COVID was talent development. I mean, to be real honest with it, when you look at what organizations can put on hold, that's one. And that's something that we've always understood, in the training industry. I think you would find a lot of training professionals that would argue with that, but those are just the situations. Now, after that initial putting everything on hold, though, people started to adapt. I mean, I really look at April. April was when, people just kind of threw their hands up and said, what do we do? They didn't want to make a lot of transitions and do a lot of new things because they didn't know if this was going to be a prolonged situation. But, as we got through April and we started to get into the May and June, people started looking at this and saying, we're going to kind of have to figure out what we're going to do here because this looks like it's going to be a while. And so, part of our job, what we looked at it from an ATW standpoint was really, working with those organizations and really, consulting with them, and helping them to understand, okay, here's what you can do, during this time. And so, I think that was a big part of really helping people to move forward. And so what I want to do today, and I'm going to share my screen here as we get started. I want to talk a little bit about, our information that we have here. So let me share the, okay, let me pick it up here. So we looking all good there, Bailey? We got the screen up there and everything looking good? All right, so thank you. So one of the things that we do every year, and I'm going to talk a little bit today, is we've done this for 14 years, a trends in talent development, survey, and we do it every year in the fall. So we just completed it and released it in September. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that as we go forward, here in the session. But as far as what I want to cover here today is, I want to talk, and I want to hear from some of the others on the phone here is, where does your organization stand right now in relation to your workforce? A lot of what we're really having to deal with is, do you have people in the office? Do you not have people in the office? Who's in the office? Who's not in the office? Do you have a combination? Because that really dictates some of the things that we have to figure out how to do. And then I'm going to share with you just some industry reactions to COVID-19 that came out of, just not only our survey, but just us going out and talking with a lot of our customers, both here in Iowa and then across the United States. And then I'm going to jump into our trends and talent development survey. Key findings, easy for me to say today. It is Wednesday. I did stay up too late for the baseball game last night too. But our Trends in Talent Development Survey, what we did is we put together an infographic, and we're going to put into the chat area here a little bit the link to that you can go ahead and download. I'm going to show it on the screen here, but I'm going to share with you 3 or 4 key findings with that. And then I'm going to ask a couple people to join in on the discussion. So Robin Beret from Bankers Trust is going to join us, and Katie Stoll, and I'll introduce them here in just a second. And that's going to be part of that panel discussion. And then we'll just open it up, and we'll try to finish up 10 or 15 minutes before the top of the hour. And if anybody has any questions, we can certainly talk about those questions. As I said, the people that would be joining me today are Katie Stoll, and I saw Katie's on the line here. She is the district director with Iowa Society for Human Resource Management. And I really look forward to some of her thoughts on what she's hearing from other organizations across the state. And then Robin, as I introduced, from Bankers Trust, and we appreciate them sponsoring this luncheon presentation, but as well as we've really enjoyed working with Robin and the people down at Bankers Trust. And I think they're kind of the epitome of an understanding that understands a company that understands the importance of continuing talent development. And that's just a little bit of background on us, the 30-second commercial. We offer talent development products and services, unleash the human potential in organizations, and help them to accelerate their business success. And that last paragraph that I have on the screen there is probably the most important. And that is, that we work with organizations that understand the importance of hiring, training, and retaining the best people. It's not that people don't understand it in some cases. The behaviors just aren't following through on that. So, we're very proud to be, working with organizations like Bankers Trust and some of the others. So here's my first question to you, and you can put your comments in the chat area or use an annotation tool and put them on screen, whatever you want to do with it. But the question that I have for you, and Bailey, you're gonna share with me some of the results in the chat area. But what percentage of your employees are back in the office? So I'm interested to hear who's back in the office. Are all of you back in the office? Are part of you back in the office? What are your thoughts on that? So I'd love to see that if you could. And then Bailey, if you could kind of holler out, because I'm in share my screen mode because I can't see the chat very easily here. But if you could share a couple of the ones that are coming in, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, it looks like Robin is at 50%. David says they're at 15% on a voluntary basis.
Okay.
Lori and Miles, they're at 100%, 85% of the time. And then I know at the chamber, we are in the office 1 day a week on Tuesdays.
Okay.
And that is 100%. So just to
hey, David, I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself if you don't mind. And since this is a kind of an engaging session here, and we'll talk about it. So David, you said that your company is in 15% involuntary. What are some of the considerations that people are looking at to choose whether they want to voluntarily come in or not?
Yeah, so I mean, actually, our policy right now is we've opened up the office up to 50%, but
okay.
We've left it completely voluntary. And we're an engineering company, and we're very well networked together. And folks, we've been able to do a really pretty good job being able to, remote work. We have Zoom, and we're all networked together. So we've just really taken a very cautious approach and giving some flexibility to our employees.
I think that's one of the things that I've heard from a lot of organizations that, and part of it, a lot of it is based a little bit on size. Smaller organizations that have a smaller group and that they can really handle the guidelines and everything, they seem to be a little bit more open to bringing some of their people back a little bit faster. I know we have 15 or 16 people in the office and have enough room to social distance and everything, but we can keep a handle on it. Companies that have hundreds or thousands of employees, their issue is much bigger. And so they're having to say, look, we need to take more time, on this.
I mean, our company overall is like 550 people,
Yeah.
but our Des Moines office is around 55 to 60.
Yeah. And so I think what happens then too is really looking at and saying, David, you brought up a very good point. Can we be productive at home? And if we're productive at home, then why rush things, back? to the office and some things. And, I don't know, this whole political climate and the election next week, I don't know. I think we could probably all agree that we're just ready for it to be done, and figure out how we're going to move forward with it. You hear, one day you hear positive things about vaccines and the other day you don't, and everything else. It's going to be interesting to look at and see what our environment is like 6 months from now, based on some of the things. So, I think that we're kind of at a point too, and as it leads into our topic today of really, understanding that we're still in a kind of a time of flux when it comes to how do we continue to develop the employees in our organization. So if we go to question number 2, when it comes to talent development, have you basically put everything on hold? Have you put some of it on hold? Or did you just move forward and say, we're going to figure it out? So you can just put A, B, or C in the chat screen. And Bailey, I'll ask you to maybe pass along, some of those thoughts as well.
Absolutely. And just while I'm answering this, Todd, just to let you know, your screen is still in presenter mode. I didn't want to interrupt you before.
Okay. Okay.
Yes, and everyone, as he switches out of presenter mode, if you want to, in the top of your screen, you can choose how you want. Everything displayed, and I recommend decreasing that thumbnail just so you see Todd. That way, you can see his full screen when he gets it back. And Todd, just to let you know, the answers I'm getting: Robin says C. The West Des Moines Chamber of Commerce also says C. And then Lori and Miles are B.
Okay.
And David is B as well. He says initially
right.
held training, but fully back with modified approach.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. And I apologize. I'm having a problem with getting that shared in the right way. If I want, here, I'll just do this. Are you looking at, is it look okay for you at this point?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. All right. That helps a little bit better. So yeah, so I think, can you run through those again for me, Bailey? I was too busy trying to be Mr. Tech Head here and get everything right here.
Of course. Robin says C. The West Des Moines Chamber of Commerce says C. Lori and Miles are B. And then David says B. Initially held training, but fully back with a modified approach.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where, when it comes, have you done some things? I think, David, as you said, initially we put everything on hold, but then we had to figure it out. And that's where we're really at, at this point in the operation and some things. So move this over here, and then I can down here. Okay, so if we really look at what's been happening, so when you look at the COVID-19 pandemic and the coronavirus pandemic, there's some things that have happened. Obviously, the first point there, disruption of industry by the pandemic constraints will restrict us for 1 to 2 years. I was in a board meeting I was facilitating a board strategic session the other night with a large company here in town that has a lot of employees, and one of the individuals in that board meeting said, we're not going to have over 50% of our people back for at least 18 months. They've already said that they're going to take it very slow. So, when we look at that and say, hey, we're going to be restricted, we're going to be constrained somewhat for, up to 1 or 2 years, I do actually think that there are going to be some companies that, are going to be very careful bringing some people back in. We've had other people, as we look at it, that have basically said that all their in-person classroom training is canceled and they're not going to resume until there's a vaccine with it. And so that's an issue. Now, on the other hand, we're starting to see, companies come back. We're probably doing, 3 to 5 face-to-face training sessions a week, and then probably doing, but in comparison, we're doing probably 15 to 25 virtual sessions a week. So it's really much heavier on the virtual side than it is it's much heavier on the virtual side than it is on the face-to-face side. So, I think there's people that are starting to feel more comfortable with it, but it has everything to do with some of the safety guidelines. The third bullet point there, employees were working remotely, so we're not able to conduct the classroom sessions. One of the issues that we're starting to run into right now is, some of our people are at home and some of the people are in the office, and how can we do something where everybody is all together? And it's almost like we're finding that organizations can do virtual meetings, much like what we're doing right now, really well. They can do in person very well, face to face. But I think what we're really going to have to start looking at is how do we do a hybrid? How do we have some people that are face to face? So if I'm doing this session right now, could I be doing it with 20 people in the room and 20 people online? And we have that hybrid that we have to be thinking a little bit about it. And then you get into, the adapting to virtual training using technology like Zoom and Teams. And it just me right now. I've actually been on 3 sessions already this morning, and I've been using 3 different pieces of software. And that's what I was talking with Bailey and before. It's like, okay, which button on this one does this? And you get kind of confused, a little bit. The organizations, that really buy into it and doing most of it internally, they can get really, really good, at what they're doing and using the technology. From a training standpoint, one of the issues that we have, and when you're talking about talent development, is that for example, Zoom and Teams, while Zoom is getting a lot better, I will tell you that, they were not developed for training purposes. They were developed for doing casual meetings, much like this. For example, when COVID started, Zoom did not have the ability to do breakout sessions. They just didn't have that ability. Well, being able to put people into small groups is a very big thing in talent development. And so that's why, organizations like us that do a lot of training, we chose to go with a training friendly platform like WebEx, so that you can do things like, polling, you can do things, and which Zoom can do, but you can do polling and you can do breakout sessions and you can show videos and you can do all of those type of things. Or software like Zoom and others have been quickly catching up to that, because that's what organizations are wanting. So when you think about, virtual training, we're still in that, okay, what is the right platform? I actually had a meeting with somebody yesterday and we were having this discussion, and I said, this is going to show date me on how old I am, but I just want the nice, simple VHS version of virtual meetings that everybody uses. We all know how to use it. It all works the same way, but we're so different. When we're setting up, meetings, we're asking them, okay, what format do you use? And we're having to modify, to some of those things. So the whole idea of the technology is going to be a bigger issue as we move forward. And then not knowing what the future holds for COVID-19, it's hard to plan for development. And this is going to be an interesting thing that I'll probably talk to Robin and Katie about. So that's your teaser alert, Katie and Robin, that I'm going to ask a little bit about that. Is it's hard to plan, when you don't know what next year looks like. I made a comment a couple minutes ago. It's going to be interesting to see what the environment looks like in 6 months. Well, if we knew what that environment was going to be like in 6 months, then we could plan for it. That's our biggest problem right now, is we don't know, what that's going to look like. So therefore we have to have a plan A, a plan B, and sometimes a plan C in order to make some of these things happen. So those are just some of the things that I've seen with our clients and things. And so what I'd like to do is just open it up for a quick conversation here. Anybody on the line have any feedback or responses or questions on any of what I've just shared on this slide? And that's also the time for me to take a drink. And it's iced tea. All right, well, hearing none, I'm going to go ahead and continue forward then. So why is looking at talent development right now important? I mean, there's a lot of very important things going on in our world right now, but why is this important? Well, first of all, when you think about it from a big picture standpoint and before COVID, is that talent development itself, training, if you want to call it that, is a great retention tool. Okay. Organizations use it as a retention tool. They market this and say that what makes us great about our organization is our ability and willingness to actually help employees to develop. And so that it's a great retention tool. If we're not doing that, then we start to look at that fourth bullet point at the bottom. I'll skip down there. We're starting to look at high performers. They want to continue to learn and grow. And if your organization is not doing that, then you've lost a key retention tool with that. So I think that's why this is important to talk about. The second bullet point, if I jump back up to the top up here, training can be a connector for organizations that have employees working remotely. when we bring something, I can't tell you how many times in the last 30 to 60 days when we have done a training session, whether it be virtual, where they're seeing everybody. And one of the things that we do, and I'm in no way talking to anybody on this call, but when we do training sessions, we require everybody to have their cameras on. We want to see their faces. We want them to see each other's faces. We think that's part of it. And I can't tell you how many times I hear, man, it's so good just to see other people, or it's good to be in the same room, whether it's a virtual room or whether it's in face to face. People are craving that connection, and as organizations, we're kind of having to balance the fact that we don't want people to to connect too much, but yet we still need that connector for organizations, because that's all about that third point there, cultural issues. I'm afraid that in some cases, organizations are getting caught up in some short-term productivity gains. I mean, I've talked with many organizations that have said, you know what, I just can't believe how productive, we're being in this environment. And David, you talked about that, just a little bit. I was talking with the president, a couple months ago as we were in the middle of everything here. And he said, look, he said, I've spent the last 20 years, convincing my employees, or trying to convince my employees, that they couldn't do their job from home. And in 3 short months, they've proven their ability to do their job at home. And so now, because of those productivity gains, organizations are feeling more comfortable about people working from home. But the problem that I think that we're going to run into, and I'm starting to see it already, and I've talked with some companies about it, is, how do we create a culture when people don't see each other, they're not talking with each other, they're not in the same location? How do we create that culture? And so, I've been doing some studying. I was looking at an article last night of a company that had went virtual, and they've been virtual for 10 years, about what are they doing, or what do they do to create, that culture. I think that's going to be a big issue that organizations are going to face, as we go into 2021 is, if this is going to be the way it's going to be for a while, how do we create that culture? So those are the things that I think are important as we get into really looking at this whole thing. So I want to transition. I want to be cognizant of my time and keep everything on schedule. So Bailey has time at the end to make sure that we have time for questions. But I want to transition into some actual data that we have that I think is pretty interesting, that we can look at, and helps us to think a little bit about, what are we going to be doing with talent development, as we go forward. So a little bit about our Trends in Talent Development Survey. We started in 2017. This is our 14th year of conducting this. So we've got a lot of data over those 14 years, and we can look at a lot of themes and trends that are happening or have happened over time. This year, we had 117 respondents from across 30 different Iowa industries. So all across the state, all kinds of different industries responded to the survey. And really the ultimate goal was to provide results to benchmark and share some best practices. We don't charge for this. This is something that we just do for the industry. And if it hasn't already been done, we'll put that in the link to everything. It's on our website. You can download it and you can use it, however you want. So we just want to share, and allows organizations to kind of look and see what some others are doing. So again, I said 117 respondents. These are people that we talk to, such as HR managers, executives, owners of businesses, operational leaders, human resource representatives, and then of course the people in a training education coordinator or training manager role. And so not all of them, and I think this is key to remember, that not all of them are training folks. I mean, it would be easy to stack the deck and say, what do training folks want to do? But we really want to get into some of the business side of things. And we really appreciate the fact that we've had a couple of organizations, SHRM and ATD, jump in and help us to get this out to different organizations. Again, I talked about 30 industries. The largest group of industries had 100 to 499 employees. And we asked them questions on all of these topics that are up on the screen. I'm only going to share a couple of these with you, but we talked with them about how much is the organization spending on training. And we can break that down by industry. So we can tell you how much is the typical manufacturer spending on, on a per employee basis as far as training. How much time a year are you training a person? What's your budget going to do? And we're going to talk a little bit about that. What are your priorities, key topics? This year, a new area, because we were able to do this because we sent it out in August, we asked them a lot about remote and virtual employees. Where are they at? And then we talked about target audiences, delivery methods, outsourcing, and challenges. Challenges being a big thing, and I've already covered some of those issues. And obviously, the big elephant in the room was the coronavirus and the infections with it. So we asked a little bit about that. So here are, here is the infographic that we put together. Again, this is small on the screen here, but we can get this off to you, through emailing it to you, and it's up on our website. But this is where we talked about some key areas that I want to share with you. And I'm going to go right into number one, and then I'm going to have Robin and Katie jump in and share some of their thoughts on this. Last year, when we did this in 2019, to give you a little bit of perspective, we asked the question last year about, how many of your employees, how many of your employees are going to be working remotely at least a portion of their time in the coming year. In 2019, that came in at about 72%. Okay. So back in 2019, we saw that 72% mark. And so we actually had started virtual training sessions in January and February of 2020, and then March hit. So we weren't having to pivot as fast as some of the others in the industry, because we were already doing some of those type of things. When we look at this year, the respondents that said 72% last year have increased that to almost 88% of companies have people working remotely now, and will continue to have, some of them working remotely in the future. And so that's huge. That's almost every organization that responded said, hey, we're going to have people working remotely. And I think we need to be considering that, as we go forth and in whatever role we have within organizations. And then we asked a follow-up question: how is talent development provided to remote employees? 73% of the respondents said, they're going to do, instructor-led webinars, somewhat kind of like what we're doing here. Some, being a little bit more, loose. 62%, they're going to connect virtually to classroom sessions. So that's where they might have a class session going live, and then they're going to have some others listen in or participate virtually. And then obviously e-learning, courses is the big one. And then 48% actually said, we may have them working remotely, but we're going to have them come in actually for training sessions, and it was where we can really, be safe within those environments. So that was the key finding, is that, there's going to be more employees continuing to work remotely. So I wanted to turn this over to Robin and Katie and just ask them, and maybe I'll start with you, Robin. Robin, how does this fit into what you're seeing at Bankers Trust?
It fits in exactly with what we're doing. We similar to you, we did actually a survey in 2019 because we also saw that this was our future, that remote work was our future. And I think I can speak for most financial companies. We're pretty conservative when it comes to a lot of things, and remote work was one of them. We didn't necessarily have a lot of people on board with wanting to do remote work for exactly the same things that Todd, that you were saying about being able to connect and collaborate and all of the things that come with being in the office. So when we did the survey last year, we surveyed all of our managers and had them almost fill out. Basically, the question was, of all of the job descriptions that you have under you, are any of them able to work 100% remotely? And of 156 managers that we had answer this, none of them answered that as yes. So it was 0. So nobody thought any of our people could work 100% remotely. Fast forward, 7 months, and obviously we pivoted very quickly. In about 2 weeks, we had almost all of our workforce working 100% remotely, as any other company did. Yep. Of the people that could work remotely. So we are seeing that shift as well. And every single thing that is listed on here has increased exponentially. And I think the one thing that for me personally, as the training and development person, I actually was talking to my leader, I would say probably about a month ago, the amount of requests that I have had to partner with business leaders to create e-training has increased 60% at least of what my role was before. And I have had to shift my focus, which, being the only training and development person at the bank that does that full time, that was a little tricky. But I will say, working with vendors, and I'm not just saying this because, Todd's on the phone, but ATW was one of the first people we called because a lot of our external vendors, most of our classes are through ATW. We work with a couple other vendors, but my first phone call was to Susie, and I knew what the answer was going to be because I've worked with you guys for so long, but it was, yep, we've got it covered. Let's switch them over. And so when I answered C to the question of, did we put anything on hold? We didn't put anything. We may have adjusted a couple of things, but we did not put anything on hold with ATW at all because it was boom. We went right into it. There were a couple other vendors. It took them a minute to get there. But we really haven't had to switch much other than switching everything over to virtual, and as well as myself getting certified in virtual e-learning. So yeah, this is speaking exactly what we've been going through.
And I think it's interesting what you said is that people are now starting to look to the talent development area and saying, how can you help us communicate some of these messages, whether e-learning or through virtual? And I think we're seeing that as well, where, I would say that our classroom, whether it's virtual or face-to-face, is down a little bit this year. Our design services, where we're actually creating those products, is up about 500%. And so it's just huge what people are wanting to do and using some of the tools to be able to do that. So let's switch over to Katie. Katie, good to see you with it. So Katie, as district director of SHRM, you deal with a lot of the human resource managers that are not only dealing with talent development, but all the other HR issues. How does what we have up here on the screen reflect back on some of the people that you're talking with?
Yeah, and I did go out and I surveyed a bunch of the people that I work with through SHRM and just my network in general. And I asked them about these questions and remote learning and their industry and what they're experiencing. And the biggest takeaway for me was it really came down to company size. And if the company had enough resources to really lean into training, so that they were a company that had already worked and focused on development and training and really leaned into developing their people through intentional, whether it's budgets or training programs, curriculums, they shifted, they pivoted really easily. They went virtual. They, like Robin, contracted it out where they needed to, or had already had that in place. And it was then the contractor that was shifting. Where I'm seeing a much higher gap is the companies that don't have a training and development department or team, where they have a very small human resources organization. So that pure generalist, where it's like they wear all the hats, and companies who just don't focus as much on the training and development. Maybe those companies in the conversations I had are more manufacturing, where they're really focused on production, not so much the soft skills kind of thing. So definitely a difference based on company size and resources that were already allocated. If they were there, they shifted. If not, they put everything on hold.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for that. And I'll get back to you here in a second, because I want to keep us moving, because I got four findings I want to share. Key finding number 2, challenges in developing. So we're going to follow that theme of developing the remote workers. The big issues that we're seeing that they came up with, as their responses were, the big issues that they had was converting classroom materials to virtual delivery. And Robin, I want you to talk about that here in a second, because that's not as easy as it sounds, is it? And then using the technology effectively. We talked a little bit about that. Are you using WebEx? Are you using Zoom? Are you using Teams? And so I'd love to hear some things there. And actually, Rob from Baker's Trust, I'm going to ask you a question and see a little bit on the technology and what you're feeling comfortable with, and then convincing leaders about the capability and effectiveness of remote learning. I'm going to reflect back on we had a conversation with a customer of ours that's in healthcare. and a nice customer of ours that we've done business with for probably 15, 16, 17 years. And when I talked with them, I started doing some calls towards the end of March, beginning of April, and just asked them, hey, how's this impacting you? What's going on? And that person said, you know what, we're going to use this as an opportunity. And I said, well, what do you mean? And she said, I've been trying to convince our leaders for years that virtual learning is something that we need to be doing, but I couldn't convince them that we should be trying some of this because they were used to the old classroom environment. And she said, so we're going to use this as an opportunity because there's no option. We're going to have to use the remote learning. And so they've actually bought into it, and they've started to show that they can do some of those things. So those were the big key challenges in developing those remote workers. So Robin, maybe first that first bullet point, I'll have you just comment to that. It's not just about taking a classroom session and jumping online and say, okay, now we're going to do it here.
No, it's definitely not. And I think I'm speaking for anybody who does in classroom training. One of the things that we love about classroom training is we like to be able to read the room. And I will tell you, that's probably been my biggest, the biggest thing that I've had to learn how to do on virtual is being able to read the room in the virtual setting. And no, it's not, because you mentioned this before, you have to have breakouts because, when you're in the classroom, those breakouts, you can do that in the classroom at table groups, and that really is a lot of times where people get the most out of trainings is when they are able to talk to other people. They're able to bounce ideas off of other people. They're able to network and create those relationships. So when they walk out of that room, they have somebody that they can pick up the phone and call, or connection that they've made that is a lasting impact. Yes, the material is awesome and the way you present it, yes, but those breakout rooms are what makes the training, and being able to facilitate that. And on top of that, having your technology that you have at your organization to be able to work with those breakout rooms. We actually have a little issue with that because of the technology and the security that we have at the bank. It works great, and I'd love to hear Rob's opinion on this too, but our retail staff that are in the branches, we've always struggled with them being able to have sound on their PCs because of the way we have our security set up. And that's been a big challenge for that group. So no, it is definitely not as easy as just making it virtual. You have to rework all of your material and be intentional with the breakout rooms. And yeah, it's fun.
Yeah. That's what you said. It's fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Rob, you're not necessarily, everybody's, as a leader in an organization is all about, is in training, but you're not in a functional role of training there. But so how do you feel as an employee of Bankers Trust, you've been able to utilize technology? You feel comfortable with it? Do you feel like maybe there's more to it? What do you think?
Well, there's multiple steps along the way. So you had mentioned Zoom versus WebEx. Well, when it first came out, Zoom had those issues, if you recall, with respect to security.
Yep.
So we were really forbidden from going into Zoom until they fixed those. There's also the issue with respect to the next step is we could now hear, we've got the steps in place to listen to WebEx meetings. And I'm speaking to you right now from my phone, not from my computer, because it doesn't have a camera built into it.
Yep.
So I can participate in your WebEx and listen to it. I can't be seen or see what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the flip side of it. So there's really steps along the way, and you have to adjust, because remember, with 600 employees, everyone has different skills, as well as different software, as well as different equipment. And it's not an overnight thing where everyone has everything they need to do what they need to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, thanks for that, Rob. Katie, the third bullet point there, convincing leaders about the capability and effectiveness of remote learning. What are you hearing from some of the HR leaders that you talk with?
I've been hearing that that's getting easier because we've been forced into this environment that is going to be less of a hurdle, depending on the type of training. So when we're getting into work styles and communication training and even leader development, we're seeing more people lean into it. But of course, the technical skills, they're still holding back a little bit. They really believe that on-the-job training is where it's at.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And it's hard. It's hard to go from what you're comfortable with, and a lot of it's going to depend upon your industry that you're in too, and what are the employees willing to do. Okay. When we talk, you can't talk about, any of this without looking at, the budget from a budget standpoint. And what we found this year when we talked with organizations that we're looking at, okay, talent development, what are we going to be doing with our budgets? 50%, and I'm going to share with you how that compares with last year. 50% of the companies said that they expect their talent development budgets to remain the same, and 27% said they expect them to increase. And so that left 23% that said they were going to go down. If you were to look at that in comparison, I went back and I looked at 2019, that 50 and 27 that adds up to 77% this year was typically, and we've seen this over the years, about 90 to 95%. They were either staying there or adding to it. Most organizations were not decreasing their budgets for talent development. And you can see a pretty big shift from, let's even say 7% in the past to 23% saying they're actually going to decrease their budgets, when they look at that. So, and there's a lot of things that go into that, though. I think some of them are looking at it and saying, well, virtual training can be more cost effective. Yeah, yes and no. Robin, it takes you time to develop some of these programs that maybe in the past you didn't have to do. You have to pay for the technology. And then also, you also have the issue where if you really want to go do a good session, like what we're doing today, you need somebody like Bailey watching the chat, making sure the videos work, people get into their breakout rooms. Whenever we do a virtual session, we always have the facilitator and then a producer. So now the cost of actually doing that session is you're doubling the manpower needed in order to put on, a session like that. So Robin, what are your thoughts on this whole budget issue here?
I would agree with what the numbers are saying. And I was actually, as I saw that, one thing I thought of is I would be interested to see of those people that are saying that their budgets are staying the same. I would love to see if they're shifting their funds to exactly what you just said of being able to cover more remote and virtual learning options, because that's what I see us doing, is that our budget isn't changing much. I will say we're being very cognizant of our budget because of the world that we live in, because we are wanting to be, again, we're conservative and we want to make sure that if something were to happen in the economy that we're prepared for it, because that's what we've done. So we're being cognizant of it, and we're budgeting similar, but we're also with that in the back of our mind. But a lot of our funds, not a lot of them, some of our funds have switched to covering the producer costs and covering, we're just kind of doing a double budget, to be quite honest with you. Yeah. We have one budget that's, hey, if we stay in this environment, this is going to be our budget. And if we don't, then this is going to be our budget. We have two, which is the first time that I've done that in the 5 years I've been in my role. I have two budgets.
Yep.
We're kind of a backup.
That's where you go back to that plan A. Here's our plan A budget. Here's our plan B budget. And in some cases there might be a plan C, depending upon what some of those, different things that come into play there. Katie, what are your thoughts from an HR professional's perspective?
The first thought I had when I saw this was, I hope that 23% decrease is not directly aligned with employees losing jobs. But that certainly would make sense for budget decreases if there just isn't the same number of need. And the other thing is, a lot of training budgets, to your point, cover more than just the training. They cover travel, lodging, meals, all of those things when you do have big groups of people moving to do training. So when I think about doing a sales training or something where you've got people for sure traveling and hotel and food, if you can do that virtually and you're cutting that out, even though the training itself is still valued and expensive as they should be, there a lot of costs do get cut out from that regard.
Well, and I think you bring up a very good point, and that's what I was going to talk about too, is that, if you look at those expenses, we have organizations that have said, look, we can afford to do more assessments. We can afford to do more of these things because we're not paying for 50 airline tickets and 50 rooms, to stay in a hotel for a couple of nights. That frees up a lot of budget to go do some other things. So you can see, and that's why, when I said that 23% can include a lot of different things. It just doesn't mean we're going to cut everything 23%. It could mean that we're being more efficient in some of the things that we're doing, but also understanding that doing it using a lot of the remote tools. I mean, if you want to buy WebEx, just for us, it's $800 or $900 a month just to pay for a WebEx, subscription, for it. It's not free. And so if organizations are really going to get serious about some of these things, they're going to have to spend some of that money on some other things. So they are going to be shifting some of those things. But we hope that we can make talent development a little bit more cost efficient while getting even better, getting better results. Okay. All right, I'll go to my last key finding, and then I just want to open it up to really just questions as we start to head up to the top of the hour. And this was, everybody says, okay, what's everybody going to be doing training on? And I thought this was an interesting one to end on. Number one, and this is a topic that has always come in our top 5, is coaching skills. One of the biggest things that the organizations really look at every year is how do we teach people, how do we teach our leaders, our managers to coach others? A big, I see in all kinds of readings, in the past was everybody wanted a boss. Today they want a coach that's going to help them to become better in organizations. And I think that relates back to my comment earlier about why talent development is so important, is that we've got to develop our leaders and managers. People don't, as Marcus Buckingham said, people don't leave organizations, they leave their managers. So how do we help those organizations and their managers to be better coaches? I'm going to skip past number 2, diversity, for a moment, and then go in but come back to it. But leadership skills and emerging leaders, again, we have people that goes back to those high performers in organizations that are looking to develop in the organization. They may not be in a formal leadership role, but they're an emerging leader in the organization. And what are we doing to train them and feel like the organization has a commitment to them as a high performer? So if we commit to you, will you commit to the organization, and will you stay in your position, for maybe a little bit longer? I think the years of having somebody work at an organization for 20 or 30 years, that's going to be very rare. But if you can take someone, instead of losing them after 2 years, if you keep them for 6 years, what is the value of that? What is the value of that person for those 4 years, where you're really getting more productivity out of those individuals? That's why number 3 is so important. And that kind of rolls into career development. Career development was one of the newer ones, but I think the organizations are really focused in on the career development. And new employee orientation, that was something I was reading last night. I'm looking forward to sharing some thoughts at some other time. But how do you provide new employee orientation to somebody that never comes into an office? How do you get them to develop relationships with people in an organization when they never have a chance to sit down and have a cup of coffee with them or talk with them and do some things? So our whole way of doing new employee orientation in this remote environment is shifting. And I'll ask Robin and Katie to chime in on that. And then the last one, diversity. Obviously, with everything going on in our environment, right now, you can't turn on the television without seeing something that has to do with diversity. Diversity has not shown up in our top 5 for many years. I don't even know if it has, but it came in as number 2 this year. So it's a big topic that organizations are looking at. So Robin and Katie, I don't know which one of you wants to go first, but really, I'd love to hear your perspective on diversity and new employee orientation. Katie, let's go with you first. You've always been the second person.
Sure. No, I'm not surprised to see new employee orientation on the list as we do shift to more of a virtual environment. But I think there's also a lot of focus on culture. And when you think about diversity as another topic, you've got to start hitting that in new employee orientation. So I think it's good to see that it's up on the top 5. And that we are focusing on those new employees, because you're not going to keep them after 2 years if you can't even engage them at day 1. Yeah. So I'm really, really glad to see that. Diversity, I'm not surprised at all. I mean, once we got through May and June, it was going to be a topic. It's going to need to continue to be a topic. I think a lot of HR people are glad to see that organizations are finally ready to spend some money on it, because it's always been hard to put it at the top of the priority list. And now we've got a great reason. It'll be interesting to see how the executive order impacts that on what continues to happen for all those federal contractors. And we do have a lot of those across the state.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. Robin, your thoughts?
All of these are things that we're focusing on. I can't tell you, I wish Sharon Gaddy Hannon was on the phone with me right now. She's one of my counterparts, but I can't tell you how many meetings that she's had with other organizations around Des Moines and outside of the state regarding what we do around diversity and how to keep it top of mind. So I also love that is, because it should be in the top 5, to be more intentional about what are we doing and how are we keeping those conversations alive. Echoing Katie as well, is the new employee orientation is super important, because like you said, Katie, if we don't make a good first impression and have our stuff together when they start, they're not going to stay, especially and this speaks to the career development, as I anticipate that to continue to creep up the list, because with the generation that we have coming in and the generations we've had coming in, there is a shift in the sense of they want a career path laid out for them. And I can't tell you, so for having been with the organization for 9 years, I was a manager for most of that, but 5 years in HR, all of those years I've been with the bank, career development has always showed up on our engagement survey as something that people want, but it just creeps up every year and more people are talking about it. And I've spent a lot of time coaching on that, in the sense of it's going to look different depending on the organization, but we're getting to the point where I can no longer say that. Like, they need something tangible. And so that's the one that we're really focusing on, because we've done the other ones pretty well. We're able to focus on that career development and that new employee orientation a little bit more heavily in the coming years.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for your thoughts. Thanks for your thoughts on this. And, I'll just wrap up with, with a couple of things, and then Bailey will open it up for anybody have any questions. But, when we asked everybody in the survey about their top challenges, it really came into budget, resources, people, and staff. Budget constraints, we've talked a little bit about, resources, getting headcount. This is not the time where everybody's going out and adding a bunch of people. If you're in an industry that's even going gangbusters, you're still being careful about how you're hiring people out there and adding some of those resources. And then, as Robin said, and I think Katie, you talked a little bit about, the training department wasn't necessarily built to do everything that is being asked to do, right now. And it's being leaned on a little bit more heavily in this time. And I know that everybody will step up to it, but that is, a little bit on the people side. And then, a little bit about what Rob talked about. Employees lack office space and sometimes the technology. So, Rob is having to, because I don't have speakers on my computer, I listen on my phone and I watch on my computer. And so we're figuring it out. But those are just some of the challenges that organizations we're having to face. So that's just some of our thoughts. I want to thank Katie and Robin and everybody for jumping in here. And I'm going to hand it back over. I'm going to stop sharing and hand it back over to Bailey. And we've got we've got a few minutes here at the end. I didn't use up all of them. You guys got to be careful. You tell a presenter they got an hour. I'm going to use 59 minutes and 59 seconds. But you should feel good. I'm giving you 4 minutes back, with it. So I'll stop sharing and take any questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Todd. And just so everyone is aware, in case you didn't see in the chat box, Susie did drop the links to ATW survey results in there. So I will be sharing those in our post event note as well, but in case anyone wanted to take a look at those right away after this event.
Does anybody have any questions? I know we've got some. I recognize some names on the list of participants here that are also in the training industry. Lori Day, I know you're in there, and Dana Miller, you guys are in there. Anything that you guys would add in as experts in the field as well? Hearing none, I'm going to move on. Okay, so I'm going to pick on one of my employees, Susie. Susie works with us, and she works with Bankers Trust. And Susie, you talk with a lot of individuals, on a daily basis. What are you hearing from folks that you might want to add in?
Well, one of the things that stuck out to me was one of your last slides had to do with getting companies or leadership to agree to move from classroom to virtual. Early on in this pandemic, early spring, I had a handful of clients that, we're going to have to put everything on hold. We can't trust our folks to do anything virtually. We can't even trust them to do an e-learning program. And then about 60 days later, I was getting calls from those same clients. Not you, Robin, by the way, saying, listen, this is not going to change for a long time. And we need to do something. Our folks are still, believe it or not, wanting to be developed. So like Todd said, we've ramped up our design services and also our virtual training, and it's gone great. It's exceeded expectations of many of my clients and leadership at those companies.
Mhm. Okay. I see that Dana did add in. So Dana, we're going to give you another shot here. You said you hit the unmute too slow. So let's see if you can be quicker on this one. Dana.
Okay, here I am.
There you go. So Dana, you talked a little bit about, the results, and especially using some of the virtual training tools like the breakout rooms.
Yeah. So, I mean, Todd, as you know, Michelle has been doing webinars for many years. And so it was an easy transition for us to move into more virtual training. Just learning the technology was the biggest issue. And so we've done quite a few virtual trainings as far as association companies and everything. And the breakout rooms, they're a big hit. We had a conference that was postponed, and it was supposed to be live, and we did it virtual. And those women, they love seeing each other because they hadn't seen each other for a long time. And so the energy in that room or in the conference was wonderful. It was so much fun. So you can make it fun, you can make it interesting, and make it engaging. And we've had pretty good luck with that.
Yeah. And I think that's the key thing, is I think you have to work at it. And just like anything else, you have to work at it. There's some, I always use the analogy, and then I'm going to finish up and we can wrap up here. I use, when we do our training on meeting management and how to conduct good meetings, I always, start with a question: how many of you hate meetings? And everybody puts their hands up. And I said, you don't hate meetings, you hate unproductive meetings. And it's kind of the same thing with e-learning and virtual learning. People don't hate e-learning and virtual learning. They hate bad e-learning and virtual learning. And there are ways to make it engaging, whether it's using the technology, using the breakout rooms, finding different ways, but it takes a little bit of work, to do it. So that's what we have to focus in on. So with that being said, I know our time's about up, and I'm going to turn it back over to Bailey. Thanks for the opportunity, everybody, to just share some thoughts and ideas.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Todd, for a wealth of knowledge, and those survey results were so interesting. I know, speaking on behalf of the rest of the chamber, definitely something we'll be talking about in the future for sure. So, well, thanks everyone for joining us today. This event was recorded again. I'll send the link to our YouTube channel, and this will get up on there within the next couple of days. If you want to look back and reflect on any of those, and then I will be sending out the survey results again. I'm in that follow-up email too. So thanks everyone. We're going to give everyone 1 minute today extra than they thought they were going to get.
Everybody gets 1 minute back from Bailey.
1 minute back. That's my gift to everyone. So awesome. Well, everyone have a great rest of your day.
All right. Thanks everybody.
You too.
Thanks, Bailey. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Todd.
Everyone.
Betcha.
Thank you
Thank
so
you so
much.
much. Thanks, Todd. Thank you.
You bet. Thanks. Yep. You're welcome, Kevin.
Amazing.